Hello and welcome to one and all. In my previous class, I explained to you that with the publication of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and also the other theories put forth by the later economists, gradually the subject matter of economics came to be evolved. Okay. I also mentioned to you about the traditional subject matter as well as the modern subject matter. So, in today's class, the continuation of the subject matter, traditional, I finished the previous class. So, the continuation of that, let me explain to you about the microeconomics and macroeconomics. Okay. Now, first, let us start with the uh, origin of these words microeconomics and macroeconomics. So, it was an economist named Ragnar Frisch. So, he was the of Oslo University. So he was the first person to coin the terms micro and macros in the year 1933. So the first person to coin the terms micro and macro. Okay. So now first let us start with the microeconomics. So this micro is originated from the Greek word micros. Okay. Meaning small. So that is the meaning of the word micros, and later on it became the microeconomics. Okay. Now, as microeconomics, what it studies basically, microeconomics studies about or analyzes about the individual units of the economy, the economic actions of individual units of the country. Okay. Or in other words, microeconomics analyzes or studies about the economic actions or behavior, anything you can say, economic actions of individual units or groups of individual in a society or in a country, whatever it is. So basically, the highlight important point to note about here is it studies about the actions of individual units. What actions? It studies about the economic actions of individual units. Now, what do I mean by economic actions of individual units? That is how an individual consumer, how an individual consumer, what is the main goal of each and every consumer with the amount of limited money income he should spend in such a way that he is getting that maximum satisfaction. So how an individual consumer tries to get that maximum satisfaction, and if it's a individual producer, his or in other words, how an individual producer, his goal is to get the maximum profit. So how an individual producer tries to get that maximum profit. So everything is analyzed individually. So this, how do they get that individual consumer, how does he get that maximum satisfaction? How does an individual producer get that maximum profit? They have to do something, isn't it? What they have to do, they have to allot their resources properly, isn't it? So if the individual consumer, if he's allotting his limited money income properly, he is getting this maximum satisfaction. If the individual producer, if he is allotting his resources properly, then he is getting that without any wastage, he is getting that maximum profit. So this allocation of resources is what I mean by economic actions. Or in other words, you can say that microeconomics analyzes or studies about the economic actions, that is the allocation of, you can include here, the allocation of resources of individual units or groups of individuals. So that allocation of resources is the economic action performed by each and every individual unit, and that is analyzed and studied by microeconomics. Okay, to put it in more simplified manner, for example, if I say, if the subject is studying about the individual income, then it is the subject matter of microeconomics. So if it analyzes about the national income, then that comes under the purview of macroeconomics. Okay, for the time being, just understand like this: individual income comes under the purview of microeconomics, and national income comes under the purview of macroeconomics. Okay, now before moving on to the what is the subject matter of microeconomics, there is a definition given by Mr. K.E. Boulding. So K.E. Boulding defined microeconomics as, with this definition you will be able to understand better. Okay, so he defined microeconomics as, always as I mentioned, start with the any definition, any quotation, start with an inverted commas. So what does it say? Microeconomics studies is the study of particular firms, particular households, individual prices, wages, income, individual industries, and particular commodities. So now, and the inverted commas. So now you can see that everywhere he has mentioned, it's not general, it is particular. Particular firms, each and every individual company, particular households, again individual prices, everything. Individual prices, individual wages, individual income, individual industries, and again particular commodities. Okay, so everything is analyzed individually. So that is why it is called as the microeconomics. Okay, now let us move on. What are all the topics or the scope and subject matter of microeconomics? Okay, the scope and subject matter of microeconomics. So the subject matter of microeconomics is explained based on certain assumptions. So when I say assumptions, assumptions are like conditions. Okay, in the sense that under those conditions, if this is the cause, this will be the effect. If those conditions are not fulfilled, then the effect or the results may vary. See, for example, I explained previously a simple thing, the law of demand. I explained to you, if uh, the demand for commodity X, so the demand for good X decreases if the price of the good X increases. That means what? Demand for commodity X decreases when the price of commodity X increases. Okay, so now this is the so the demand for commodity X is depending upon one variable, that is the price. But in actual practice, demand for any commodity is not depending upon only price. For example, let us take another variable, income. So the demand for commodity X also depends upon the income of the consumer, isn't it? So even though if the price of the commodity X increases, if the consumer's income also increases simultaneously, then he might not decrease the demand for the commodity X. Okay, so like that, the demand for any commodity depends not only on the price of the commodity, it depends upon so many other factors. But here, what we are doing, we want to bring out a relationship between only two variables, that is demand for commodity X and price of commodity X. Okay, so now we are eliminating all this. So under the conditions, all the other things remaining constant, we are not including anything else. So under those conditions, if the price of commodity X increases, automatically the demand for commodity X decreases. So just a small example, these are all called as the conditions. So if those conditions are not fulfilled, then the result might not vary. Now this is the, you can say that the price of the commodity is the cause and the demand for the commodity is the effect. Okay, so all the microeconomics subject, the topics, they are all based on certain conditions. So let us see, this is just one example I gave you. Let us see what this is, the meaning of assumptions or conditions. We are assuming income of the consumer is remaining constant. Under the condition the income of the consumer is remaining constant, the demand for the commodity X decreases when the price of the commodity X increase. So that is a condition we are putting forth. Okay, so in the same way, there are so many other conditions put forth before explaining the subject matter of microeconomics by the economist. Okay, so the first condition what they have put forth is full employment. Full employment means it is assumed that the country is efficiently uh, fully employing all the available resources. Okay, so that is the first assumption. You can question that how is it possible, but without this is only, it is like a laboratory experiment. Okay, so in the laboratory, if you are conducting in any experiment in physics or chemistry, you are making certain conditions, isn't it? Economics is not having any laboratory, the whole universe is the laboratory. Okay, so we have to put certain conditions so that the economist can frame the law. So for that reason, for the sake of simplicity, it is assumed that the country is always under the condition of full employment. Even if it is not under the condition of full employment, they know the way in which the full employment can be reached. Okay, so the first condition put forth is full employment. Then the next condition is something called as marginal analysis. So this you will study in the later topics, but to put it very simply, the marginal analysis, there is something called as marginal unit. So the marginal unit is, it is the last unit. Okay, last unit of consumption of a particular commodity, last unit of the employment of labor by a company, etc. For example, if the company is employing 10 laborers totally. Okay, so this 10th laborer, totally they are having only 10 laborers, this 10th laborer happens to be the last laborer employed. So this laborer is called as the marginal laborer. So whatever the company wants to decide about the wages or any promotions, anything, whatever the policies the company wants to decide about regarding the laborers, then the company will decide about the, by taking into account the 10th laborer, the marginal laborer. So it is not whatever is applicable to the 10th laborer, it is applicable to all the other 9 laborers. Now I think you can understand the convenience here. Instead of analyzing each and every laborer, all the 10 laborers, it is easy for the company to take into account only the last laborer, and whatever the policies is applicable to him is assumed to be applicable to all the other 9 laborers. So everything in all the analysis of microeconomics, only the last unit is taken into consideration. Okay, so that is the meaning of marginal analysis. That is the second assumption. And then the third assumption is, the third assumption is there is something called as ceteris paribus. So this is a Latin phrase, ceteris paribus is a Latin phrase which translated into English, it means other things remaining constant. Other things remaining constant. Now, what do I mean by this other things remaining constant? What is the connection here? See, just now I explained to you that demand for commodity X is a function of price of commodity X. Okay. Now, the demand for commodity X, we all know that it is not depending upon the only the price of the uh, commodity X. It depends upon the income of the consumer, isn't it? It depends upon what are all the alternatives. So you have the alternative goods, for example, alternative good for commodity X is commodity Y. What is the availability of that alternative good Y in the market? And what about the taste and preferences of the consumer? So the demand for commodity X depends upon all these factors also. But if you're taking into account all this income, alternative good, etc., everything if you are taking into account, you cannot bring out the relationship between the demand for commodity X and price of commodity X. So in order to isolate the effect of one variable on another variable, we are eliminating all the other variables. Okay, so that's why all the other things remaining constant, all these other things will remain constant. That is ceteris paribus. So all the other things remaining constant, demand for a commodity X increases when the price of the commodity X decreases. This is the meaning of ceteris paribus. This is something called as the law of demand. We'll come and study detail later. So in all the microeconomic analysis, this assumption of other things remaining constant is being used in order to bring out the relationship between two variables by isolating the influence of all the other variables. Okay, so based on these assumptions, now you can understand. So this is the condition. We cannot take everything into account. So that's why it is assumed to be constant. That means what? Income is not changing. The prices of alternative good Y is not changing. The availability of good Y is not changing. The taste and preferences of the consumer is not changing. Everything is remaining constant. So based on that condition, we are establishing a relationship between the demand for commodity X and the price of commodity X. So this is what is called as the ceteris paribus. Okay. And based on these assumptions or condition, the subject matter of microeconomics is being framed. Okay. So let me explain to you what exactly the topic microeconomics covers. So moving on to the scope and subject matter of microeconomics. Okay. So it is divided into, first it studies about the product pricing. So product pricing, in other words, how the price of each and every individual commodity is being determined, is being fixed. Okay. So normally the price of any commodity is determined based on the demand for a commodity and the supply of the commodity. So if you have to study about the pricing of any one particular commodity, you should also know about the demand factors influencing the demand for the commodity and also factors influencing the supply of that particular commodity. So if you have to study about the factors influencing the demand and supply of the commodity, then we have to study about the theory of demand. So under the product pricing, we will cover the theory of demand and also theory of supply. So theory of supply, the supply of any commodity, that is production, depends upon the production of the commodity. So the production of any commodity depends upon the cost of production of that particular commodity. So when we are analyzing about the supply of that particular commodity, we will also study about theory of production and the theory of costs. So all these are detailedly analyzed in the product pricing. Okay. Now next, moving on to the next pricing, that is the factor pricing. So I mentioned to you, uh, production is being carried on with the help of factors of production: land, labor, capital, and organization. So These land, labor, capital, and organization, they are to be properly rewarded, isn't it? No laborer is working without any reward. No landlord is renting his land without any expectation of any rent from the whoever as rent tenant, isn't it? So like that, each and every factor, they are expecting the reward. So factor pricing means what? How the price of each and every factor is being determined. In other words, how the rent is, on what basis this is the rent you have to pay, on what basis this is the wages you have to pay to this particular labor. So like that, rent, wages, in capitalist guest interest, and finally the whatever it is left over, that happens to be the profit for the producer. So the determination of each and every one of these factor prices, rent, wages, interest, profit, that is the next topic covered under the microeconomics, that is factor pricing. Okay, then the third topic covered under is theory of economic welfare. So I already told you, microeconomic study is about the allocation of resources. So theory of welfare means, economic welfare means what? It is nothing but efficient allocation of resources. So if anybody is allotting the resources properly without any wastage, then automatically their welfare is being promoted. Okay, so that is the next topic covered under the microeconomic analysis. So this is broadly covers the subject matter of microeconomics. Okay, now there are other names for microeconomics. Microeconomics is also called as price theory. Now, why it is called as price theory? Just now I mentioned to you, like the main subject matter of microeconomics is how to determine the price of the products as well as how to determine the prices of the factors. Okay, so since it major part of the microeconomics studies about the fixing of prices of commodities and factors, it is also called as price theory. Okay, and another thing is microeconomics is also called as, it is something called as partial equilibrium analysis. So partial equilibrium analysis, the reason is microeconomics studies only individuals or groups of individuals. It studies either individuals or only groups of individuals. It is not studying the entire economy, isn't it? It is only analyzing partially. That's why it is called as partial equilibrium analysis. Okay, and the next one is, next important point you have to know about is microeconomics was popularized by Marshall. Okay, so Marshall, he was also called as the father of microeconomics. So he was the one who analyzed economics from individual point of view. So he gave more importance to the problems of the individuals than for the country or the nation as a whole. So he was also called as the father of microeconomics. Okay, so as I mentioned, popularized by Marshall, microeconomics is also called as the price theory because it determines the fixation of prices both for factors as well as the products. And I also mentioned that it is also called as the partial equilibrium analysis, since it is studying only partly only the individuals, not the general, not the country as a whole. Okay, so till 1930s microeconomics was popular, and after 1930s, due to Great Depression, microeconomics lost its importance. Then macroeconomics became popular, which I will explain to you in my next class. Okay, so I hope it is clear to you people. If you have any doubts, please mention in the comment box. And if you like this, if you find this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Until my next video, take care. Bye bye.